Well, um, thank you everyone for coming along. Um, this is the meeting of the group that in RDA I think has the longest title for their interest or working group, which is the Coordinating Earth Space and Environmental Science Data Preservation and Scholarly Publication Processes Working Group. And as you can see from our first slide, we have condensed that down to repo to pub. And although we are focused on earth and environmental sciences, I think the lessons we're starting to dig out from this to other domains, not just earth and environmental science. Next slide, please. And if you're a new RDA member, I don't think any of you are, so maybe we can skip that. But I think we're all members of RDA, so we don't need to get you to join. Okay, next slide. This is our agenda, and if you can please sign into the notes, Trish has put the link in the chat. For the first part, we're going to get Danny to give us a report on the progress of this group, because as a working group, it's 18 months, and we are hoping to finish this piece of work off by May, I hope. And so Danny's going to give you an introduction, in particular, the interviews we've been doing with publishers and repositories. Then we'll have an interactive working session where Matt will walk us through the publishers' responses, which is reasonably well advanced, and already we're asking, you'll see people are already helping us because the transcripts we have are exactly as they were, with a bit of redaction of personal information. And we need to summarise these and get the key points out of it. And unfortunately, under the IRB we have with the University of Arizona, we're not allowed to use AI to condense them. So again, I just think you can see the breadth of comments we're getting back and wondering how we can turn this into something actionable, which is where I will come in at the end. So let's move on to the first second agenda item. These are the chairs. We're a motley crew. Unfortunately, Natalie couldn't join us today, but let's go on to the next one. And here I'll hand over to you, Danny.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Leslie. Okay, I'm going to jump right into this. And for for everyone that's aware of us and have been following us, um, I'm just going to kind of give a high level summary and not go into too much detail here. And actually, if I can maybe minimize all of you, there we go. Um, so we'll go over the drivers and why this working group came into existence. And it primarily stems from the current situation or the ongoing situation of uh, the friction between the publication process for scholarly publication and the data publishing process in primarily domain repositories as it relates to the data that underpins the scholarly publication. So, increasing requirements are being placed on researchers to share their data, specifically those coming from publishers and journals to share the specific data underpinning the publication, but they're also receiving pressure from funders to share that data as well. They typically wait until the very last minute to publish the data. Many of the domain repositories we're speaking to see this happening. They've waited until they've published the manuscript or they're going through the manuscript publication process, and that's when they think about data. That timeline is really compressed, and the timing of the workflows don't really match up. there's little awareness across these stakeholders. So publishers don't really have opportunity to speak to repositories and vice versa. And then researchers have very little awareness of the timing of either the data publication or the manuscript publication and the timing of the need for a data set citation or DOI. That's compounded with the fact that disciplinary curation takes a lot of time and an active involvement by that researcher. However, that's only happening at the moment that they decide to publish their manuscript. Let's see. There we go. So we know that domain repositories are critical for ensuring that those data are truly as fair as they can be. Um, and we also know that publishers are challenged to work within their existing operations to develop and enforce data publication guidance that aligns with disciplinary curation across the whole corpus of their journals. So a publisher has several journals, and we're finding out that it's sort of the wild, wild west out there, both on the repository side and on the publisher side on guidance and communication and ability to react to this problem. So the result is this sort of mismatch between these two workflows. And under the pressure of the manuscript publication, which is really their sort of their value proposition, researchers will, in a hurry and need for a DOI, end up at a generalist repository for that data publication. And really what we're missing here is the chance for fair data curation. And so that's the main driver behind all of this work. When we look at a timeline, I started socializing this problem as a repository manager to the Council of Data Facilities and some of the other forums within the Earth Science and Information Partners meetings, or ESIP, and also got sort of a groundswell of consensus that yeah, this problem is being felt by others, both on the repository and on the publisher side. Also socializing this with the COPTIS, the Coalition for Publishing Data in the Earth and Space Sciences. Whew. I always think I'm going to get that acronym wrong. The the folks at all of these forums all agreed that this was worth addressing. So from 2020 to about 2024, we socialized this at RDA plenaries under the auspices of the ESESIG. And we started to kind of coalesce and form the working group, but we were working on the problem before we were actually approved by TAB. That happened in August of 2024, and our end date was supposed to be February last month of this year. So we started working right away. We realized that if we interviewed, one of the tasks was interviewing both repository and publisher stakeholders. We realized we would need IRB approval for this. We decided to go through one of the co-chairs, Natalie Rea, her home institution at University of Arizona. That process took quite a long time, almost 10 months. And so we didn't get IRB approval until late June of 2025. However, during that time, we were still working on all the components that we would need to launch these interviews once we got to them. So we developed our case statement, we went through IRB, we started immediately working on a set of repository interview questions and publisher and journal interview questions. And that's really what the working group focused on until we got our IRB approval. At the same time, we were also reaching out to and setting up those interviews and making some of those scheduled dates to speak with repository and publishers. So we started in roughly in July with the interviews. We had a goal of hitting 10 of each repository and publisher stakeholders. We just finished those interviews, actually the early part of this year. So we're in 2026. We got the late start with the IRB, so we requested an extension from RDA in January. That's until June of 2026. To date, we've gotten 8 publishers and 7 repositories reviewed, and 7 publishers and 2 repository transcripts anonymized. So the process of that I'll get into in just a little bit. But so that's where we are. We have an extension until June. We're in the thick of transcribing um, the audio from the interviews and then redacting what we need to for that personal identification, problem. And then we will share all those with the working group to be able to start going through and analyzing them. So a little closer look at the work plan. This might be a little redundant to what I just spoke about, but months 1 through 6, we really worked on the use cases, identifying what those would be, listed the repositories, drafted the review questions. The IRB took quite a long time. Um, the last 7 to 12 months have just really been conducting the interviews and getting the transcripts over for the working group to start going through them. What's still left is creating that sort of generalized model of the journal publication workflow and the repository workflow. And then from that analysis of the interviews and the workflows, start to develop a set of recommendations. For journals, that would be actions that kind of will help support and facilitate the repositories to get that work done on the disciplinary side and be able to provide them with a DOI as soon as possible. But for repositories, that looks like better supporting the manuscript publication needs. So for example, like access to peer review or embargo or double-blind access, whatever those needs are, starting to have that dialogue and that communication, really. So what did the process look like? The questions were developed by working group members. If you're interested in what those are, the repository questions and the publisher questions, you can reach those through the QR codes there. The interviews were conducted by the chairs, and that was an IRB requirement. They were approximately an hour long, and they were recorded through either Teams or Zoom. Um, that was transcribed and then cleaned and anonymized. As Leslie pointed out, that had to be done by hand. We're still in the process of doing the repository ones. And then those transcripts were organized in Google Space by thematic questions so that the working group could dig into them. The working group members are now reviewing the anonymized transcripts, and lucky all of you, we get to help us today in working on that. We're working to pull out themes, notable discoveries, and things like that to aggregate and analyze further. And then this last little bit here is about the connections that we did make to known external activities that are doing complementary work, such as Tier 2. Um, that's a project to enhance trust and integrity and efficiency through reproducibility, but more specifically, they have a pilot that was looking to create a reference for editors to assess reproducibility and fairness of data. I think that's just been um, completed, and we'll look at how that informs the work that we've been doing. There's another group at Force 11 that was looking at very similar but higher level types of interactions between publishers and repositories. I think there it was more bringing awareness, but I'll defer to either of my co-chairs on those details. So that's kind of the soup to nuts of what we've been up to for the first, actually the full tenure of the working group. I think we got a late start because of the IRB delay and scheduling the interviews. And then just the sheer volume of the transcripts has been really challenging for 3 of the chairs to go through and anonymize and organize for the working group to dig into for the analysis. So some of the things that are coming out, we started with publishers for the working group to go through, and these are just some of the emerging topics and themes. Some not so surprising, but some were not what we expected when we first started the group, getting the group together. And that's publishers, publisher operations across the different journal portfolios are incredibly diverse. And that poses scaling problems for any publisher if they were to try and address or incorporate recommendations across all the journals. There's a really strong emerging role of learned societies and their relationships with the journals and publishers that could be significant and impactful. Um, they tend to have different policies or processes relative to the rest of the publisher portfolios. Highly heterogeneous practices among domain repositories as well with respect to their activities relevant to scholarly publication. So, who provides provisional DOIs, who can enable embargo, who supports peer review access to data, that those capacities and activities vary widely across disciplinary repositories. And then the emerging role of the institutional domain and research data librarians was actually something that surprised me as well, but something that's emerging too, and the role they play in all of the sort of data publication space as it relates to the scholarly pub. And so, just to give you a flavor of what's coming out of the interviews, um, this is selected responses that Matt was able to pull out for our session here. And the question relates to the role of learned societies, or the theme or topic relates to the role of learned societies in the data publication policy space for journals. And you can see the responses here of individual interviewed publishers. And I don't know, Matt, if you want to speak to anything in particular to pull out. I know it's a lot of content on the screen. We can just let people read.
Yeah, it's a lot of content, and it's just, I guess, to give people a flavor or to give an illustration of how we're going through the transcripts and pulling stuff out on different themes to get to those overall conclusions that you were mentioning or briefly showing on the previous slide. So here, one of the things that we were talking about is obviously something that publishers have known for a while, but over the course of our interviews and discussions in the working group became clear other stakeholder groups weren't aware of is that often learned society journals that are owned and ownership is retained, but they publish in partnership with a commercial partner. They do retain a very strong, if not completely dominant role in setting all forms of editorial policy, including data sharing policy for their journals. And so that's just to illustrate that that is coming out in the interviews. These are some of the kind of snippets of that that are coming out in totally independent conversations.
Yeah, thanks for that. I love that the bottom comment kind of really echoes what you just said. From my experience, people in societies are very passionate about the checks, and they're very passionate about the high quality content. So I feel like they do perform these checks at a very high standard. Um, yeah, that was interesting, and it's interesting to hear you even now say it was kind of known on the on the publisher and journal side. But elevating that, I think, is one of the really big values of the work that we're doing across all the stakeholders. Just bringing awareness to these nuances that really have a big impact is valuable. So I didn't want to take too much time to kind of go through this, because most of the folks that have been showing up at our sessions have been following us or are involved in the working group quite a bit. Leslie, I think I
Oh,
saw that you had your hand
sorry,
up.
yeah, no, I just like to, as a chair, reinforce. Yeah, it's interesting. Matt said the publishers knew this, but um, Shelley, I don't know whether you're aware of it. I think it's been the most outstanding thing that's come out of this group is surfacing the issue with the publishers all kind of keen, but they want a different flavour. And as some of you know, with
You're breaking up for us, Leslie.
work closely with the science unions and societies, and I'm wondering if this is, yeah, that better? I'm
Yes.
just saying, can we surface this independently with the publishers and the societies? Because if they start to work together, maybe we can help solve this problem. Anyway, that was just a
Yeah,
discussion point, Danny, on your part. This is your last slide, isn't it? Yeah, so I guess
I
what I'd
think
like to
so.
do now is, um, can people, does anyone have any comments? Oh,
I guess we had one more. We had one more.
okay, right, go ahead with that. Sorry, go ahead with that.
That's okay. I had forgotten. These were great quotes. And really, this is just, as Matt had said, this is just to give you a sense of the kind of content that we're pulling out of this or elevating up here. Um, we can just take a moment and let people read these. I think the challenge here is that there's a reticence to recommend specific disciplinary repositories. Um, and some folks have lists that they no longer maintain. Some folks have a reticence of doing it at all. And there are valid reasons for that, and showing favoritism or not having a sense of understanding of all of the services that repositories can provide. And I do believe that maybe when we get into the conversation piece or the discussion or a Q&A, Leslie, you had somewhere raised the question of whether the repositories can do something to help journals better better raise awareness of the appropriate repositories by journal. And maybe that's something, right? Maybe I was getting to you, Shelley. I can't see any of you, but I can see that a hand's raised. So I'm assuming it's Shelley. Um, but I also think this is our last slide, so we can get into the conversation or Q&A. So go ahead, Shelley.
Yeah, this work that you're doing is so important, and it's really perfectly timed. Uh, Danny and Natalie Ray have been such a partner on a number of projects, and one of them is actually trying to figure out how to better bring awareness to researchers about preferred repositories long before publication time, such that it's not the burden of the journal. And I think that's really key here. And I'm just going to leave it at that, Danny. So, um,
Yeah, I think, we could plug some of the other work here, and I think this work will dovetail nicely into the GeoFair work that an NSF repository here in the United States, but is shooting for a global awareness of the types of resources that researchers need to share their data, and get them thinking about those resources early on. One of which is, at a disciplinary community, what are the repository resources that you use? And so, one of the outcomes could help in this space of providing some resources to publishers to point authors to, or at least point the community to their own resources that they're using. So yeah, thanks, Shelley, for the comment. Anybody else have any other discussion points or any questions regarding how the group is progressing or process wise? See everybody.
Okay, well, if
Okay.
not, we'll hand over to Matthew now.
Matt, I'm happy to just keep sharing and just you tell me when to change a slide. Does that work for you?
Yeah, that works for me. I only have one slide, and then I think that's easy. And then I think we're gonna jump to. So we're going to do them all in one. I think is that the plan now? We're not going to do the two
Yeah,
breakouts. Yeah.
I think just go through. I'd go through the repositories first because that'll just be a flavour. But the publishers, certainly, I'd love opinions from Alison and James and Shelley on the actual document, the amount of information we've received, and what the best way is to try and summarise it, because it's taking forever to do the transcripts, and at the same time we've got to get the summaries done. So over to you, Matt, to go
Yeah.
through your
So
one.
yeah, so just before we kind of get into those uh get into the repository and the publisher responses and the documents that we have for going through those collaboratively, just wanted to basically give a little bit of background. And this kind of is summarized in READMEs, but it's always better to go through it just so that we all kind of have a good understanding of the documents that we're going to look at. So they are presenting anonymized interview responses. They're organized by the interview question for both publisher and repositories. They didn't follow obviously the same interview structure. And they're structured by interview question, not by publisher or by repository, but by interview questions, so that we can more closely analyze common themes, differences, key parts of what we're looking at with the overall interview structure. Documents are live and they're in progress, so please bear that in mind. Not all the transcripts yet have been anonymized, so you will not see every single interviewee response added under each question. So there's more to come with that, but in the publisher document in particular, we have quite a lot of information. You'll see that you can already start to pick through and see, there's a few more publishers to add in there. And the aim of the document, as we've been saying, is to provide a space for collaborative thematic analysis. So we're trying to pull out those common themes, those common threads, the issues that keep coming up. And bearing in mind your own particular kind of stakeholder viewpoint that you might come to this with, things that strike you as interesting or different. That example that we were just talking about societies owning or retaining control of a lot of different editorial policies being something known to one group of stakeholders but completely new to another group of stakeholders. So if there's something in these responses that you're like, wow, please do pull that out, make a comment, or ideally highlight it, but also make a comment about what it is that you are thinking is a particular insight. So yeah, the ways to contribute are read through, add comments, you see notable responses or remarks. You can, if something has already been posted, if you agree with it, feel free to upvote it or add another comment. The other thing that's kind of surfaced as we've been doing these as working group sessions since the start of the year, there have been sort of reflections on that. Sometimes it's not entirely clear. These are spoken transcripts. There is a limit to how much we can edit them. So we do encourage you to kind of try and read through that if you can, to try and see what people are saying. They are just verbatim transcription of conversations, and it's very humbling when you do this work. You sort of realize how many times you say and and you interrupt yourself, and that comes across in the transcript. So there's some things we can remove and there's some things we can't. If something is very, very unclear, or you think something may have been incorrectly transcribed, please highlight that, and with something we can go in and check against the recorded audio as well. But the core aim here is to pull out just that general information. If something needs very, very detailed transcription, if it's turning out to be a really core theme or something we need to come back to, we will come back to it using the audio as well. And yeah, as Leslie was saying, the IRB at the University of Arizona forbids us from using AI. So this is being done with standard transcription tools. and then good old-fashioned hard work and manual editing. So, just that is if you why we are taking time to get through this. And when you see how much stuff there is, you'll hopefully have a full understanding of that. So that's all I had. And then we can jump to the two different sets of responses. So we have they've been put in the chat. So we have repository responses. This is the less developed of the two. We have a lot of interviews done, but the anonymization is a little further behind. And we also have then the publisher documents. So we were going to do breakout groups, but because they're a little imbalanced, suggest that we just all look together firstly at the repository responses and then look at the publisher responses. I'm not sure, Leslie, Danny, how you wanted to structure the next part. Whether you want to talk people through things or you want to just let them explore documents.
Okay. Well, first of all, has anyone got any questions on the process? I mean, we're getting pretty close to having to finish it, so I hope we don't need any drastic changes. But if you want to comment on how we're doing it, and first of all, and then I think what we could do is, Matt, you walk us through the publisher, the repository one, or Danny, because it's your baby, and then we'll move, and maybe we could do with some working on the publisher responses. But I will get in first. If you're going to start making comments, can you go to the bottom of the document and work up, because we're getting so many comments because everyone starts at the beginning, and we've probably got enough comments on publisher A, but we need a bit more on DEF. So first of all, any questions, Alison? I saw you unmuted for a while.
Yeah, I was. I'm totally sympathetic with the laborious nature of this. That's what it was like, and I've done quite a lot of this sort of thing. Have you, just a quick one? Number one, I would not organise it linearly. I'd do columns and cut out pieces of paper and spread them on the floor and all on a table, that sort of old-fashioned stuff, but it works very well. And pull out the thematic do the thematic analysis that way, which works very well. Don't need AI, and it's better if you don't, because then you understand better what you are actually drawing on. You really do. But have you used a program like NVivo at all, or are you familiar with such things that existed free? They still exist, and they can help if you really are floundering.
Yeah. So this is where Natalie would be great to have here.
Okay, sorry.
She's very aware of that. She uses these tools
Good.
as standard. For what it's worth, I'm married to a social scientist who does critical discourse analysis. So I've been dragged through this kicking and screaming many times. So yeah, no, we're aware of that. I think for the purposes of this, however, this was kind of the best way, I think, to get that collaborative community input. But then we will be kind of doing a sort of analysis of what everyone has kind of pulled together, as well as the themes that we've been seeing. And I completely agree with you. That's the best way to kind of know what the data that you actually have is to go through it yourself. Exactly.
And put the themes in the top of my columns and then map the bits. That's the digital way I've done the pieces of paper on the floor, which I used to do. There was something else I was going to ask about, but that's okay for the moment. Thank you. No, that's good.
So I will.
Sorry, it was the IRB. The IRB is really, really useful, or can be, especially seeing you had to wait so long. I hope you did a bloody good one, because that helps enormously if you've structured your questions to give you the answers you want, which many people in this social science thing don't think of. Have your table, and this is what I want to get at. And that helps you by this question. And I would just suggest you go back to your IRB or make sure that's very clear, and that'll help you analyse. But that's me talking to a student, not talking to you.
No, that's very very helpful. Thank you. No, that's very helpful.
I think that part of the duration of time that the IRB process took was because they came back to Natalie about the questions. And so there was a bit of a dialogue and a back and forth on that. I will admit I am completely naive and had no idea what we were going into with both IRB and the content and the transcribing. And fortunately, I'm so blessed that both Matt and Natalie have had experience in this. And actually, Natalie has very recent experience coming off using it for another project. So she had some kind of awareness of the types of programs that were out there and what we could and couldn't do via the IRB. So I feel like we're in the capable hands or the experienced hands between Natalie and Matt, at least for process. Maybe sheer volume was a little unexpected, but certainly getting into the questions, the challenges I saw, even just looking at the transcripts, because you think you're going to be in a linear dialogue that follows the script, and of course that doesn't happen. So in real life it's kind of all over the place, and the one that I did finish, I went back in with an eye to organize it, and you'll see I only got halfway through the questions before this session, whereas the publisher content is nearly finished. But it's so challenging to kind of pull out the relevant pieces to which question and then still feel like you're keeping linear flow of the actual dialogue in the interview.
Yeah, I looked at the repository. So yeah, I've just opened the publisher. Yeah, I see what you mean. It's very well developed.
So the one thing I did want to comment on was maybe it was during, I guess the last plenary for RDA was IDW time in down by you all, Leslie and Allison. Yeah. And somebody had asked us if we have a more structured rubric for doing the analysis. And of course, we're just pulling out organically, we're just pulling out what we're seeing. And I don't know if those who have done this before, maybe I'm just looking to you, Allison, but if there is some benefit to, I guess I wasn't really sure how we would answer that question in terms of maybe, with a rubric, you might miss content that you're not specifically looking for. And we're doing this very organically and with lots of eyes, sort of crowdsourcing it among the working group members. But I wonder if anybody has comment on that thought to come up with some kind of rubric to attack this more in a more structured way than what we're doing now.
Yeah. It can help. Matthew, do you have, I've just put in one thing there. What you are probably doing as a naturalist, I have often retro looked for a ruddy rubric. So this is like, oh my goodness, I didn't think about this. This is for stuff that didn't have to go through the IRB, internal things. But naturalistic inquiry is my fail-safe, I suppose, my fallback position, and thematic analysis where you are exploring for the themes and you haven't got predetermined themes. And that, for a scientist, which is my background originally, but I realised I had to talk to the community very early on to get uptake of new ideas and techniques. It's one of the things you are trained to do, or should be trained to do as a scientist, is have a blank. There's a hypothesis. Have a blank slate. And I taught ecology, so there was and various other things, but ecology was one, in an area where people had lots of beliefs. And you are dealing with it at the moment in the USA with health and dietary things. There are beliefs. And so I would tell people to create a blank slate in their mind and observe and see. And that's what I think this naturalistic inquiry helps, and I think it's a very objective way of approaching the matter. So does that ring with you, Matthew, and your wife, Natalie, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And it's, yeah, I also, I mean, I'm a geologist by background, a geochemist by background. So for me, yes, getting my head around these different lenses that people bring whenever they're doing these kinds of analyses, and we've done prior to this, we did, for example, discourse analysis of Hansard, and things like that, and that get reading it with a different view, and a different kind of approach. That definitely. So yeah, naturalistic inquiry is one. I don't know a lot of them. I'll be blunt because it's not my background, but thank you. That's really, really helpful. And the thematic analysis. I think thematic analysis is the one I was kind of thinking was what
we're doing.
what we were leaning more towards, but there is then also that naturalistic inquiry if there's other stuff surfacing, we're looking for this. I tend to focus on the common themes. I'm finding those really, really interesting. And then the differences, and then as thinking about this as the publisher, I'm sort of seeing, obviously for everyone else it's anonymized, but I'm sort of seeing how different publishers are kind of identifying similar issues and some are identifying different issues. So yeah, that's really, really helpful. I think take that. And Natalie will have given that a lot of thought as well. It's a shame she's not here to add her thoughts.
The other thing I pointed out there, you are hamstrung in a way, or it can be of benefit, which was partly what I mentioned with the IRB scrutiny, is the questions can influence the way people respond, as you know, leading questions, that sort of thing. But even the questions you've asked, you have a hypothesis behind them. So if you're reporting on this, you are defining the desired, a sort of desired outcome in the, and you need to clearly state that. And I'm sorry, I didn't pay attention earlier. I'm still awfully busy, as I apologise to James. I'm supposed to read his paper, and to someone else. But yeah, the questions need to be rooted, each one in a hypothesis, and then it makes you then remove that lens to some extent and see how people are responding. But you are leading them by asking those questions. Now, it's not as bad as some social science analysis, which I'm sure Natalie will talk about, because you can really lead. I don't think it's as fraught as that. So many social scientists will go crazy about that topic. But do go back to thinking about, can I put a hypothesis to each, and have I got a positive or negative response? Or have I got, in my question, in my responses to this hypothesis? And that can help your structure very greatly. So, thanks, James. Anyway, I think I've said enough, but it's very interesting. I love this sort of thing. Just to give you an idea, we surveyed the Ecological Society of Australia, which contains researchers and practitioners. We got 700 responses. It was very, very good. And they were all ostensibly ecologists. Now it's even wider. This was 13 years ago. And we asked them to define themselves, which was a stupid thing to do. I don't know what we were going to do with the answer, but we got 90 different types of ecologists. Oh, I'm a molecular fish ecologist. Oh, I work on koalas. Oh, oh my gosh. So, did that affect their responses later? We tried anyway. So there you go. So that's where designing the questions can help or hinder.
Moving on, James and Shelley, I don't know whether you've actually seen this compilation of the publisher responses, but James, Shelley and I are co-chairs of the complex citation group, and we're thinking of, bringing complex citations into publications. And every time we meet for complex citations, I think of this work, because it's kind of asking the question, where will we be most effective in introducing complex citation objects into the publisher repository, or not so much repository, the publisher researcher workflow. Anyway, that's just a comment, but I was going to pass over to both James and Shelley just to make a comment on the work we've been doing and whether you think we're on the right track and how useful these summaries could be. So maybe I'll start with Shelley and then throw to James. You muted Shelley. You muted James. Shelley.
Yeah, I'm here. It's incredibly important. The and the timeliness is really keen. The publisher has the responsibility for the scientific record and everything that supports it. By partnering with a repository, that then offloads the persistence of the data set supporting data set software, whatever, supporting that particular research to another party. And we have really not dug in on that as a societal good. And we don't fully have that same level of support for data set permanence as we do for journal article permanence. And that's a worthy discussion to have. And by this exercise, asking not exercise, but the work that's happening here, asking what are the author guidelines, how are they common, and seeing the challenges that the publishers have, it also helps us understand that it's not just that moment in time, that we actually have to position the best possible answers much earlier in the life cycle. And by depending on the publishers take a lot on their shoulders. They're the ones that have both the hammer and the carrot because they can make certain things happen. Not, you don't want to lose an author. You don't want to make it so hard. You want to make it reasonably efficient, not too many clicks, not too many pieces of information, and yet we still need enough. But then there's also, you have the publication, and that is the way progress for the researcher's career is measured. It shouldn't be the only thing that's the measurement is, but right now it is the primary mechanism. So by giving the publisher all the responsibility to get this right, it's not fair. It needs to be distributed across the entire ecosystem. So I think it helps all of us understand that there's other pieces here. Matt, I saw your head nodding, so good. That's good. And it's complicated. It's really complicated. I could
James,
go
do you have any comments?
No,
Is
I
this
was
work
just being
relevant to the
really.
complex citations?
I definitely agree. Think it is. We've started with the implementation side of saying, well, as a researcher, how do you know what you need? I mean, generally speaking, with the publishers, you go, okay, well, I want to publish a manuscript, but then if you have to provide the data, where do you go? How do you start? And we've said that, you should be collating all the information that you've done for your research and that, considering it from a starting point. You come up with a hypothesis, you want to go do some amazing research, you need to collate all that stuff together. And thinking of it from then is important. And I know sometimes that doesn't always work in reality. I know DMPs are obviously a big part of the data life cycle and that sort of thing, but sometimes it's just, we've got some money to do this, let's go and do this. So it's not, as Shelley said, it's not easy. I think it will help highlight it and make those stories that tell, it's about the story and the narrative. Justin, who I work with, often says, it's the story and way how you weave that into what you're doing. So being able to tell that story, I think this is definitely an important part of that understanding. But also, sorry, I realize I've been off camera and there's only like 7 of you here. So
Late.
Okay, so like we're still way ahead of time. I'm just wondering whether we could go back to the slides and skip to the bits I was going to do, and then if we've got any spare time left, we can spend a bit of time working on the publisher document. So if someone could share the slides, please. Okay, so next one, please. Well, I don't think we need a recap, but I guess what I'm asking you is, oh God, that should be repository interviews. I just wondering, move on to the next slide, please. Oh, and we need to identify 3 key takeaways so I can keep Trish happy and fill in the form. So maybe we could go back to the previous slide and what do we think are the key points that are coming out of these publisher interviews? Don't all speak at
Given the
once.
amount you've got there, that's rather a tall ask. How much?
Well, I'm afraid my observations are stemming from a person who's a neophyte and entirely naive to the publisher. It was like pulling back the curtain on the publisher workflows and not fully appreciating the heterogeneity across journal portfolios within a single publisher. And talking to people about that was really eye-opening to me. A little disheartening, if nothing else, but incredibly eye-opening. And I think it has implications for, our expectation on any recommendations that come out. And I think that hearing the difference between top-down and bottom-up communications or expectations for data citation within scholarly publication, or even the process of checking on data and the burden that presents the workflow on the publisher side. It poses just as many challenges as I can appreciate on the repository side of thinking that somebody's just going to be able to implement preliminary DOIs tomorrow or something along those lines. So the heterogeneity and the ability to move the needle were the 2 big things that were eye-opening for me on the publisher side. I know what those look like on the repository side, but
One
does
thing.
anyone? God, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Sorry,
You
Leslie.
go ahead. I'm typing into the slides. Keep going.
I was going to say one thing that struck me, and we have with the publisher interviews when we designed these and who we were going to interview, we have tried to get a broad spectrum of different kinds of publisher here to get an idea of the different kinds of different parts of the sector are experiencing. But one thread that came through, whether you're talking to someone that's commercial or society, big, small, whatever, there is a reluctance among many of these publishers to recommend repositories. or to push people towards certain repositories. And many of them, if you read through the transcripts, they're yearning for some kind of trusted third space where they can refer people to. And I think, as we go through our potential recommendations or our next courses of action, that is something that we could probably explore. I don't know if that can also serve as a space in terms of trying to encourage people to deposit earlier in the cycle or something like that, or think about their data earlier. There's a lot you could do with that space, but for publishers, I think what they really would like to do is that they don't want it's not that they don't want the responsibility for this. This sounds as if they're pushing it. The transcripts reveal quite a lot of thoughtful thinking about it. They're worried about getting it wrong. They're worried about leaving people out. They're not sure what the criteria would be for curating that list, maintaining that list. And as Shelley was saying, now they're really, really worried about how permanent some of these repositories are going to be. And there's one of the interviews, I'm sorry, I can't remember off the top of my head which one. They talk about going through recently their list of repositories and finding one has gone, and asking what happens to all that data. If it was a publisher and they failed, there's clocks, there's backups, there's that can't be allowed to be lost from the scientific record. But what happens when the data goes? And so this is why they're reluctant to do it. It's not that they just don't want to do it. They're quite nervous about getting it wrong. And so a trusted third space in Earth, environmental and space sciences could be something that could be quite valuable to explore.
No, put in a bit for
Any
I
more
can
comments
see.
on that? Yeah.
Yep, if that's okay, Leslie. Sorry, I put my hand up but not doing it properly. Just a quick one. In defence of the publishers not recommending repositories, I know some that do, and I object to all of the lists for various reasons. I don't want to publish in Figshare, sorry. I don't want to, and I think this is possibly the ecological background, but yeah, but it's difficult because it's a bit like websites. Websites used to be content driven for applied people in particular, and they've been deprecated all over the place. I've got a publication 2015 that has links everywhere for the evidence, and the website was taken down. It's in a national library now. That's about it. So this isn't new. But yeah, what do you do when you rely on ephemera?
Okay. Does anyone have any comments on the repositories? I'm madly typing, so I can't see what's going on in the Zoom. But if you don't mind me just having a personal comment to the fellow Australian, i.e. Trish, that's on this. Just so you know, Trish, we did interview, was it Faye of University of Queensland? And that was our example of an institutional repository. And I sat in on that interview, and it was absolutely amazing what came out of her discussions. And I'll also confess that because of the difficulty of the IRB and the time zone problem, as co-chair, I ended up leaving all this work to Danny, Matthew, and Natalie because it was just too hard. But so I feel a bit guilty being listed as a chair on this. So I just nag them to make sure we get our sessions running.
That's a big part of it. That's a big job, Leslie. And
Okay.
there's still tons of content to go through that is that's now, ready. So that's the heavy lifting too.
Okay, so if we can just flip back, and I will not be able to see who's putting their hand up. Are there any key points that came out of the repositories so far that we could highlight?
Yeah, it's unfortunate because it's there's only one and it's only half of the question, so I apologize for that. We have to get to the repository transcripts.
Does anyone want to make a comment?
Of course I do.
Go for
Of
it.
course I do. I'm sorry. Wanted to ask a question about, you just mentioned, Leslie, the selection, or you tried to get a representative selection of repository types, publisher types. Is that correct? So institutional repositories. How far did you go with some of the more outrageous, interesting publishers? I'm trying to think of MDPI, for example. Although you've got to anonymise, the context is important, so, or could be important. Disciplinary, generalist repositories, institutional repositories. You've got. Could you give a bit of scoping? Have I missed something? Sorry, so I don't want to waste time.
No, you haven't missed anything. And I can say that we took aim at the disciplinary repositories because this is where the friction is happening. And this is where we're hoping to see more fair data being shared as a result. If we could move the needle or make an impact, it would be to direct authors who are also the data producers to the disciplinary repositories earlier than the manuscript. And I know saying that out loud, it sort of sounds, well, we haven't engaged the researcher stakeholder yet. We're only talking amongst repositories and publishers right now. But the hope is to alleviate or ameliorate the problem at disciplinary repositories. We know this problem doesn't exist at generalists because they turn around a DOI in no time flat because they're not really curating. So we didn't we didn't take aim at or target a generalist, but we did do institutional. And for that, I was quite surprised that um, although they don't necessarily have the bandwidth to perform disciplinary curation, they are experiencing the same challenges or some of the same challenges that disciplinary or domain repositories are experiencing. Even though they're not going to that level of curation, whatever they do apply, it's heterogeneous, but they are experiencing some challenges. And they might have more steady support, but less flexibility to adopt some of the recommendations that we might put forth, like double-blind review possibility or capacity or provisional DOIs or so I don't know if that answers your question or not, Alison.
No, that explains a bit about, I don't quite know the rationale why you added into institutional repositories, but you've given a good response to what you got out of adding them. Yeah, I think the repositories that I'm familiar with, disciplinary repositories that I'm familiar with, sorry, Leslie, who has put a hand up, they don't have the same onus for open access, and maybe that's partly because of capability that I've observed. Institutional repositories, like, they've been slower to take up the challenge of maintenance, I suppose, and evolution of technology, partly because they're probably not supported within the institution. So that's advocacy at their end that they need. Anyway, I will shut up for a moment. Leslie, sorry.
I was just going to say, this is something I have been noticing, and I don't know what you call NCI. I mean, we're actually trying to bring in a new class of repository, which looks like it's an institutional. but some of the institutional repositories we're picking up on are capable of, what can I say, checking on domain-specific standards. And so that's like, for example, at NCI, we can do genomics, geophysics, satellite. We've got all the QA/QC, even though the staff are not the specialists that you would get at a domain repository such as the one that Danny runs with BecoDemo or EarthChem. So it is creeping into the institutional repositories, but I haven't quite seen it as generalist. Okay, so I'll pass over to Matt. I see you've got your hand up, and then James.
I was just going to speak to the other part of Alison's question, which was about the distribution and the publishers. We didn't go too far into those crazy publishers. No, we didn't really. What we looked for was a balance of commercial, non-profit society, a range of sizes, which could, we had a lot of questions about editorial capacity, staffing capacity, that related to a lot of this kind of stuff. So it was kind of to give us a kind of idea, as you were kind of saying earlier, having a hypothesis behind your question, of, who's going to actually have capacity to do that kind of thing. So I think we did achieve a mix of that. And also, I think one that's quite interesting is society commercial and society non-commercial partnerships. So we didn't get everyone. We got actually almost everyone we set out to get, but we didn't get a few. I think at least one that I will not name got very bogged down in what their lawyers might think. So well, I suspect that anyway. But no, we got almost everybody, and I think we've got a good represent. I really do think we have a good representative cross section in that.
Go ahead, James.
Unmute. Yeah, just going up, following on from back to Leslie's bit about the domain specifics, where you can have people who are able to invest in that, but equally you're now seeing that you might have invested in your core element, but you're now being asked to make it interoperable and shareable with similar domains, or cross domain even, and that interoperability is harder because what someone thinks that is different to what you've defined that is, and that what am I trying to say? It's a bit like apples and pears, where that you're trying to explain that it's a fruit. To someone might say it's a fruit, but you're actually going, no, these are apples and pears, they're very different. And understanding that complexity can get lost when you're going at the higher level, and that's another challenge on top of that. You might say user domain specific, but then can they offer that additional spread as well?
Okay. Any more comments on what you think the key points are from the publisher repository interviews?
All I would
Okay.
say is haven't looked well enough. So
Okay. Well, again, this document will be open, so
yeah, which is lovely.
if you want to join, you can add comments to it. So the next slide is, can you move on to the next one? Yeah, so I was going to do takeaway 1, something from the repositories. Takeaway 2 will be something from what you've just given me over the publishers, or vice versa. Takeaway 3 was whether someone wants to comment on the project overall as a takeaway. which I thought could come from the non-chairs that are present, because otherwise we'll
That's really
You
putting
have a lot of work.
two people on the spot.
three.
Three people on the
Okay.
spot.
Okay, go for it, Alison. Well, I go back to this. Yeah.
It takes me ages ages to find the, hand up Bizzo on the little heart. Okay. Well, number one, I think it's fascinating what you're doing. You're quite right that it begs the question of the researcher coming in, Danny. And this the kind of Matthew, you were talking about this. We've just been mentioning the R3, whatever it is, repository list. Can you do that? But for the moment, it's publishers and repositories and the connection between them, and how they can make their life easier. And you've done a wonderful amount of work. So you've got those hypotheses to make it easier to analyse, etc. A lot of meat, a lot of variety, but that's the world. So that's not too bad. But there was something that just went out of my mind as the rubbish bin man went by. Not that you can hear that. I'll remember the other comment I was going to make, which is quite important, I think. But I think it's very useful. That's right. I know. It's a movable feast, though. So that's the thing that always scares me a bit. If one could, and I don't hesitate to say we, although I've joined you, if one could set up a scene or a situation where you've learned from the existing state of affairs, you've highlighted the commonalities, the differences, the subtleties, the needs. How can that best equip or arm this particular venture into the next 10 years? I look back on the previous 10 years and see how much things have changed and the labour involved. Someone mentioned the capability to respond to interoperability, for example, has grown out of all proportion compared to 10 years ago. FAIR didn't exist, etc. Well, FAIR did just. That's a burden that is going to keep on going. And can this particular exercise offer any advice to improve the ability to respond and capability to respond to change into the future? If you can second guess, do some horizon scanning.
Well, I guess my quick comment would be, oh, sorry, James, I didn't know you had your hand up, is like at the moment we're overwhelmed trying to meet FAIR, but not too far in the future is going to, well, we already know the care guidelines will be out soon. That's going to have to get into this mix. And also the demands for AI ready data, that's increasing, which requires even greater documentation of your quality and methods. Okay, James, over to you.
Yeah, I think one takeaway is there's a lot of effort going on here. There's a lot of stuff that you have to do. I think also the thing Matthew alluded to, I think it was Matthew, around they want like a third party to be able to say whether a repository is there or whatever. And I know there's obviously a lot of stuff around trust and core trust seal or Nestor or whatever other things. And I think that's a big thing around where do you go and how do you know? And I think that's something I've taken away. I haven't gone through all the stuff you've done, so I think that's a big thing. And I think that alludes to your comment, Leslie, about the process and how do you know what you need to do?
Okay, well, look, that's really useful. I'll just copy. I've just gone and lost it. Do you go and okay, right. I just like seeing you're giving us some helpful advice. Could we move to the next slide, please? Oh, okay. You need to see that. No, back one. You're chopping off the heading.
I am.
The heading for that is how best could we wrap up this working group? That's at
Oh,
the
you
top
all
of the
can't see
slide.
it? You can't see it?
Yeah, you can't. Ah,
Shoot,
yeah, I
sorry.
can't see.
I
Right.
can see it. I can see that one.
Okay.
So, as Danny said, we've already got a 3-month extension, and I think we're due to finish in
We're
May.
hoping, yeah, we're shooting for May, but we gave ourselves that extra 4 weeks of buffer. And Matt, I wanted to say we're meeting every 2 weeks, but we didn't go to weekly now, did we? If we have, I missed last week. We're going
We've gone to weekly.
I missed last week.
We're alternating between 11 a.m. UTC and the other time, which is not nice for me. Is it 10? It's 10 o'clock UK, so I can turn. Yeah. There's 2 times basically. We're alternating between 2 times. So it feels bi-weekly.
Well, because I've systematically been missing one of them, I think.
Well, again, with I've been missing one of them because it's been 11 p.m. But with daylight saving, it's definitely down to 10 p.m. It may come down to 9. I never know which ones go 2 hours or 1. If you want to join in, that's the link to the working group. And Natalie usually posts something the day before we're holding each meeting and what the focus is. But please feel free to join if you want. I guess there's 2 things I'd like to throw out. There's the short term. What are we going to do to finish this up in May? Well, the critical thing is getting help to get us through those reviews and getting the the synthesis that is what we'll be publishing. We also fully intend to wrap the documents you're looking up once we've made sure they're squeaky clean and publishing them on Zenodo as a permanent resource, because we're pulling out some types of information, but equally as well, there may be other bits of information that could come out for another group. And so the first thing is the short term. What's the best way we can get to May? And I think the idea is we're just going to do recommendations, aren't we, Danny? Or what's the meat of what we're going to publish?
Yeah, that was the original proposition in the case statement. But the challenge there is that everything is so heterogeneous that by the time you generalize to make something applicable across or try and scale across many stakeholders, then have you diluted to be not that helpful? I think that's the question I'm having in the back of my mind. Like you can abstract and abstract until you get to a point where a recommendation applies to many in the group, but then have you diluted it so that it's not that impactful? I fear that may be our on our horizon.
So really, we have to get something written. And
yeah,
I guess what I'm saying is maybe rather than doing recommendations, that our summary document is aimed at pointing out the heterogeneity and what needs to be fixed. Shelley, what would you feel, or Alison, James? Help us, because we're bogged down.
Well, one of them was also one of the outputs was supposed to be a visual model of how these stakeholders work, and I think because of the same, we run into the same problem. Everybody's so specific, and yet they're specific and broad that it would be hard to do.
Maybe simplistic, but I haven't really. Heterogeneity is meat. What is it? Bread and water to me, or something.
Bread and butter.
bread and butter. Thank you. Something like that. Meat and drink. That's it. That's it. Meat and drink. Yeah, bread and butter, meat and drink.
Meat and
Yeah.
potatoes.
Okay, we could go on. Lasagna. Never mind. Bit of frivolity. I don't think it looks too being ambitious. I think, Danny, you are indeed in the weeds. I think you're all in the weeds a bit at the moment, aren't you? I know that feeling, and it doesn't look too bad, says me. Therefore, setting myself to maybe cast an oversight eye, and I think that's what. Who's the other person than me? James might be able to, not as an embedded member of the group, may be able to help with from that point of view, because it is hard. Yeah, anyway, I'm just saying, I don't think it's too bad. How best could you wrap it up? Finish the, just watching, I think you've got a bit of difficulty with the rolling chats. Just looking at it, you've got to and fro questions after your first question to flesh it out. That makes it a bit harder for you. Yeah, so you've got to finish who's going to do the repository one? Ha ha ha. So once you've done that, maybe you send the material out to someone like me, or I noticed on your page you've got a couple of other people coming, Susanna Barbosa, Guillaume Wright, Katina, people who are less involved, and say, can you pull out do some thematic analysis of this? Says me doing some thematic analysis of another survey at the moment, but so much, much, much smaller. Maybe that's a way. And then give us a due date. And dinner hour, sorry, Danny. Yeah, that's the only
all those foods,
yep.
all those food references were getting me.
Yeah, sorry.
Meat and potatoes, and
I
can smell dinner getting cooked downstairs.
Bread and butter. I guess, yeah, if we're realistic, we're only going to get one short report done, and these interviews cleaned up for, publication. Then there is the what's next. Sorry, Danny. Just this group actually spun out of the original Earth, Space, Environmental Sciences interest group, which itself has now moved up into a community of practice. So this work could then go back into that. I'm just raising the possibility as to whether people feel there could be another working group. If there is, it's not committing the current chairs to it, but it is something we need to think of beyond getting ourselves over the hurdle in May. Over to you, Shelley.
I wonder if we, you all know my bandwidth is ridiculous right now. I can't take on anything else, but I wonder if there's a moment in like April, May, June, where some of the projects that we're all working on simultaneously have like a convergence opportunity. Like for this particular one, there's a partner project identifying repositories to share with publishers. And then once that takes place, we could, that would trigger a conversation with the publishers to say, hey, we wanted to let you know that these communities have weighed in on this piece of information, and we're holding the information here, and you can use it or point to it or pull it in. And I just wonder if we can create that energy loop. I don't know. It might be a little too tenuous yet, but if we could come back to that, and then getting in front of publishers, Matt, I'm thinking about all of the publishing sessions, SSP and such, where we have to get ahead of that to get those sessions in. But that would be a really perfect place to introduce all of this, where you have the publishers in the room.
So what's the project you're talking about, Shelley, please, so I can record it?
So GeoFair is working on recommended
oh, you're right. Okay.
repositories. And then there's also the probability we'll get similar types of information from our data resilience work next week, depending on how Danny's thinking about it, but we could very well do that as well. And just with those identified, just with that kind of guidance, that will do a lot for publishers, but then we can go to AGU and EGU and JPGU and say, listen, we need you to understand that anyway, I'm sorry. I just feel like we could probably sequence this out in the next 18 months or so.
I think,
I mean,
yeah, I
go
think there
on.
could be something there, because there are all these complementary efforts that are sort of circling around this repository researcher timing, finding it and getting there early, um, problem. And we've kind of tiptoed around the repository registries, but I've heard consistently that they're challenging for researchers to use. One of the drivers behind GeoFair was that they are not using those. They're tending to stay in their communities and word of mouth or by pedigree of your mentor in grad school or whatever repositories they used. That's somehow how you learn. But it's not the resources that are out there. They're either challenging or not elevated or maybe a combination of both. But there are a lot of complementary efforts to your point, Shelley. It would be really interesting to pull all them together. I don't know what space that happens in or how they
I
can
like Leslie's
inform
idea.
and leverage.
Yeah, the
Yeah, go ahead.
community of practice. I really like that.
Yeah.
I don't mean to be crass, but I hope you miss the 3 a.m. community of practice meeting. I would like, could you mind? I think you should prioritize sleep. I'll take one for the team. Um, but I do think we could bring that up in a few hours, and that could be where these things come together in sequence. Um,
But I think it does dovetail with this work, and I think that the publishers need to be in the room when all this is going on so they can
yeah,
hear what the
yeah,
communities use and how to best find those resources. And yeah.
yeah, yeah. Because maybe what we haven't said in this particular last, hour and a half is that gatekeeping that publishers do is really the editors. And the editors are commonly our community members. And so they both promote what they know and take back what is challenging. And it's a pivotal role, especially with society journals. Not, I don't, others are different, and Matthew can talk to that. But for AGU editors, they have such a really keen opportunity to influence their own communities, and I don't think we're leveraging that as strongly as we could. Um, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, mindful of the fact that we're at the top of the hour, and thank you all for coming. I will just add one more comment, and maybe Shelley, Danny, you and I can do this in Berlin next week. Is don't forget that we have a quick chat to Simon Hodson to help, whether from their side with the connections with the science unions and societies, we can organise a webinar where we raise the issue with the societies that this is a problem and we need to get you involved to make it work.